Our study lineup today. Got some brilliant speakers you're going to be hearing from. I should introduce myself. I'm Zak Cochrane from Love Music, Hate Racism. We've very much tried to carry on the tradition of Rock Against Racism. Love Music, Hate Racism was the slogan of Rock Against Racism. LMHR have been involved in a number of festivals in the early 2000s, played a key part in driving back the British National Party in areas like Stoke and Barking, where they tried to get a foothold. So we very much see ourselves as part of that tradition. We've got a speaker, one of the speakers running late, but without further ado, I'll give all the speakers 7 minutes each. We'll then have plenty of time for you all to make questions and contributions. So the first speaker I want to introduce, I'm delighted to say, you might have seen him DJing earlier in the Garden area, is Roger Huddle. He's one of the co-founders of Rock Against Racism. He's also the author of this fantastic new book, A Reminiscence of Ra, which I'd really, really recommend. There's 2 bookshops out there we can purchase this. It's lots of different chapters by different people who are involved in Rock Against Racism up and down the country. So Roger's going to talk for 7 minutes to start with. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's difficult to sort of position this because today was the day when we was up Clifton Rise and the fight for Lewisham. VAR had actually began a year before that. VAR began August 1976. We had our 40th anniversary last year, hence the book. VAR started after the blues guitarist and superhero of the media, Eric Clapton, while gigging in Birmingham, used the stage for a continuous racist diatribe, mainly about sending packies home and foreigners being in the audience, where the Enoch Powell was right, must be supported, etc. Now, Clapton, apart from getting all his money from playing black music mainly, it was an outrage because it was completely and utterly irresponsible at a time when the National Front were huge. The National Front were clearly making inroads on the fascist far right. They were dominating not only in the polls in terms of elections, but they were also on the streets. A guy called Red Saunders, and myself and a few others, Red is very, very, very sorry. Would love to have been here today, but unfortunately he's in Denmark for a well-earned rest, so he couldn't be here. But Red knocked up a letter quickly and asked us to sign it, and we sent it to the press. I'm going to read a little bit of the letter. When we read about Eric Clapton's Birmingham concert, we were urged, when he urged support for Enoch Powell, we nearly puked. What's going on, Eric? You've got a touch of brain damage, so you are going to stand up for us and you think we are being colonised by black people. Come on, you've been taking too much of that Daily Express stuff. You know they can't handle it. Own up, half your music is black. You are rock music's biggest colonist. You're the good musician, but where would you be without the blues and R&B? You've got to fight the racist poison, otherwise you degenerate into the sewer with the rats and all the money men who ripped off rock culture with their checkbooks and plastic crap. Rock was and can still be a real progressive culture, not a packaged mail-order stick-on nightmare of mediocre garbage. Keep the faith, black and white unite and fight. We want to organise a rank and file movement against the racist poison in rock music. We urge support. All those interested, please write to Rock Against Racism, Box M, 6 Cotton Gardens. P.S. Who shot the sheriff, Eric? It sure as hell weren't you. Anyway, the thing was, we put our boot in it because we said we was going to form a movement. Write to us. Cotton's Gardens was where I was working at Socialist Worker at the time, and that was the box for Socialist Workers, so they said we could use it. And within 2 or 3 days, we'd had 200-300 letters. Within a week or so, we'd had 500 saying, yeah, I want to join. So we had to do what we, basically do what we said we're going to do. And I think that's the important thing. The whole idea from the beginning was that we, as rock black music, jazz fans, reggae fans, the whole inside popular culture fans, if you like. I used to be, I was a mod in the 60s, and I was a soul man. I loved soul music, I loved bluebeat, etc. So the idea that somehow or another we could use this music to fight against racism was very, very important right from the word go. And I think that the other important element of it is right from the word go, we thought, well, if we run gigs, we'll have a black band and a white band, or if there's no black band possible, we'll have a black sound system, or whichever way we can do it, we'll find some way that the gig will be multiracial. So that at the end of the gig, we could have everybody back up on stage to show black and white unity in action. And so that's what the idea was. Right from the word go, VAR was a very, very political movement. It was aimed at against the National Front and to fight racism. The National Front argument is also important because of Lewisham. Because all of us, one way or another, Red and myself, in various ways, have come from a tradition where you would have some kind of publication around your organisation. We started off a thing called temporary hoarding. The idea of temporary hoarding was very much influenced by the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and also the whole idea that you produce a magazine that is to be fly posted, and then you produce another one and that can be fly posted. So the whole idea with temporary hoarding, there's a copy here, I've got the Lewisham copy. This was, we put out a Lewisham. Also, it was the day that Elvis died. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is our montage for Lewisham. And so that's what we do.
Upside down.
Sorry, upside down.
Lewisham's still upside down.
So that was that idea, and then we would go to the middle, and this we said is a year under heavy manners. You know what heavy manners are, and it was a year of fantastic street battles and street fights, and we would do posters and montage. So we would use cultural elements right from the word go to push and develop the politics of VAR. VAR. Visual, the VAR star, which was worn by nearly 1 million people in the end, and I think that the whole idea of the cultural side, the visual side of it, was as important. So Lewisham, Red was at Lewisham. He tells a great. I wasn't there because I can't say why, but I can say why. The editor associate worker wouldn't let me go. Mainly because I was a skilled worker and there was very, very few skilled workers in the days before computers, and the problem was I might get vested and the paper wouldn't come out. Anyway, that was neither here nor there. But anyway, Red went, he says, the most exciting thing for him when you come at the top of Clifton Rise was that an elderly Afro-Caribbean woman, she opened up her windows next to the demonstration, and she put one speaker on one window. She opened the next window, she put another speaker on the other window, and then she started blasting Bob Marley across the crowd. And I think that was the kind of thing and the mood of it. Right from the word go, the music and the politics were together. And I think that's the same today. I mean, it's what came out of it, we'll hear later. Out of VAR came two-tone, out of VAR came the whole idea of bands playing together. I mean, people here can't imagine what it was like. It was very divided culturally at those days. We tried to pull it together, and I think VAR's legacy, if you like, is that we did pull it together, and we created a diverse, multicultural area that music can develop right up until today. And some of the music today is extraordinary, and the music will be produced. Stuff is coming out now with Black Lives Matter in America. You've got all kinds of stuff, music being made. Whether or not you could build a campaign around it is to be seen. It all depends how we do it and how we mobilise it. But at the centre of anything we do today, the visual and the music must be part and parcel of the struggle, not added on at the end. And if we do that, then we can, if you like, fight them on the streets during the day and dance in the evenings.
Thank you very much for that, Roger. The second speaker I'm delighted to have on the panel was the lead singers of a band called the Bodysnatchers, performed the lead Pottertown Carnival that some of you might have been at for Rock Against Racism and the Anti-Nazi League. She's been involved with the Specials and the Specials AKA and had a fantastic career. So please welcome Rhoda Dakar. Happy to have her on the panel.
I've got to set my clock because I can only do 7 minutes and I'm notorious for talking a lot. My notes. Right, well, following on from what Roger said, I just wanted to break it down into 3 sort of areas: back in the day, now, and the future. Back in the day, it was a funny old world actually. Back in the day, sort of in the 70s. I'm mixed race, and that really wasn't very accepted back then. I was nobody really wanted us. And there weren't many of us. In my school, there were me and I think 3 other girls. So in a school of 500, and there was me and my mates who were members of the WRP. So they were like proper lefties, and we used to sit up all night arguing about politics. And I still know them today, obviously, because that's why I feel very confident, I suppose, because we spent so much time arguing about politics. I feel very confident in what I think and what I have to say about anything, because we kind of thrashed it out, and it was all like, no, you can't say that because, you know. So it was interesting. They were interesting times, but we knew we were outsiders. We were outsiders, just a fact. And so we had to kind of find our place, and we found our place within punk, because punk accepted us straight away without, there was no kind of like nothing on the door saying who are you, where have you come from. We were accepted as punks. So, because at the time when punk first started, it was all outsiders, so we were all outside together. It was fine. There was a definite politics within punk, and I just have to say what you said about Two-Tone owing something to Rock Against Racism, with the best will in the world. I mean, we were dancing in clubs, we were going to punk gigs at night and dancing to disco during on another night and stuff like that. And we were dancing to. It wasn't Rock Against Racism that started that. That was happening anyway. It was. That's why Rock Against Racism made sense to us immediately, because it's kind of embraced black music and white and perceived white music. But I mean, John Lett started playing. He started playing reggae tunes in the Roxy, the first punk club, from time. So there was always a reggae backdrop to punk anyway. And we before that we had all been soul kids and Bowie kids and whatever. So to be fair, I think yes, the agenda may have been furthered by Rock Against Racism, but it was there anyway. I don't think it's I think it was happening anyway. Right. So what else did I want to say? Right. The other thing at the time, because I do remember the very first march, the one that went to Vicky Park. I remember that very, very particularly because I had no idea where Victoria Park was, because I'm from Brixton and Hackney is some. I've still only been to Hackney a few times in my life, and I only ever went there after I was 30. So, but it's true. It's just a fact. You know what I mean? I didn't go there, so like I wasn't going to Vicky Park, so I didn't know where it was. But when the next march came past my house and went up to Brockwell Park, I thought, I can do that one. And so I was at the Brockwell Park. Did you call them carnivals? I suppose you call them carnivals now. Yeah, Brockwell Park. Yeah, that was wicked. Yeah, it was really wicked. I mean, and it was good. My mates would kind of marched at the front all the way from Charing Cross. From Trafalgar Square. I didn't. It came past my house. I put my hands up. I just joined in when it came to my house. But it was, But the thing is, I was with it, and I was up for it, and I've done my share since of walking the streets in protest. So forgive me for that one. When I had started working with the Specials, we did the Leeds Carnival. The Leeds Carnival we drove up there from Coventry. I was staying in Coventry. We drove up to Coventry in cars and somehow found ourselves in the middle of this National Front March, and that was pretty terrifying, I have to say. We were in, you know, it's not like we were in vans, we were in cars, and there were people kind of, I don't know how that happened, but there were like, you know, there were these kind of NF people either side of us as we were trying to drive through to get to this carnival where the Yorkshire Ripper was still abroad at the time. But that was, you know, it was a good gig. It was interesting. It was, I think there was a bit of kind of needle between some of the people there, which was quite funny, which kind of resulted in Rico refusing point blank, 2 minutes, thank you, refusing point blank to play the solo on Ghost Town. But I mean, anyway, you know, these things happen. But so that was, I don't wish to make it funny, it's just like, you know, I just remember those are the things that I remember. So now I've got 2 minutes left. See, as usual, I've talked too much. 2 minutes left. Now we have Love Music, Hate Racism. I think our biggest struggle is class, not race, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, race, whatever that means really. I think our biggest struggle is between the haves and the have-nots, not between black and white, whatever. I think obviously there is a thing about Islam, and that is a big deal, but once again it's not about race, it's about religion. So I'm not going to sort of go into what that, you know, the vagaries of that and what happens. I mean, that's a big subject. The thing that I have the most problem with at the moment is this thing about safe spaces. I'm not really sure. So people, you know, I'm the kind of person that will get thrown out of places for having a go, and no, but I just think it's important to sometimes. I mean, I would hate to describe myself as iconoclastic, because I think that's a bit too poncy for me. But I think sometimes things have to be said, and I think people have to be upset sometimes, and eggs have to be broken. There you go. Eggs have to be broken, and we have to, you know, we have to have that argument and move things forward. Right, finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. Okay, our next speaker, we're very pleased to welcome Hassan Muhammad Ali. He's an actor, writer, screenwriter, director of the Muslim Institute. He's also went to a number of Rock Against Racism carnivals and events throughout the last 4 decades. So please give him a welcome.
The way that you started, actually, you could have spoken for me, really.
All right.
In terms of being mixed race, working class, coming from London being what you called a funny place, which it was, completely different place to what it is now, completely transformed, and that's partly because of why we're gathered here today. I think the legacy of that. It was a very cold place. It was a very small place. It was kind of monochrome. I kind of remember, and if you're working class, mixed race or black or whatever minority, you just floated around. You didn't fit in because you knew that there were powerful people who just didn't want you there. One of my earliest memories is actually a black and white telly in the corner room, and Enoch Powell's face coming on the screen, and our whole house was. I've got 11 brothers and sisters. Strangely, the whole house would go silent. My mum would sit there watching Enoch Powell and the latest vile racism coming straight out of the screen into our house. It had a kind of chilling effect, really, and it made you feel very weak, very vulnerable, very alone, and you thought there's nothing that you could do because this man dominated politics. I mean, I guess what's different now is that actually when Powell came out with his Rivers of Blood speech, Ted Heath sacked him from the cabinet. These days, you can make Powell-like speeches, and you can get on breakfast TV or the Today programme on Radio 4 and rant off about Muslims and da-da-da-da-da-da. You can get the front page of the Telegraph. It's exactly Powell-like language, to be honest. I mean, it's exact. It's the same DNA. You kind of know it. If you were there in the 70s or late 60s and you heard Enoch Powell, you hear the echoes. coming out of your screens and your newspapers and the internet today, what's happening in Charlottesville, etc., etc. So, in one sense, things have changed, and in one sense, things haven't changed. And in one sense, that's what makes me angry and dispirited at the same time, because a lot of people here in the room, we've been fighting racism all our lives in one form or another, and oppression and stuff like that, and we're still having to do it, but we will do it. Don't worry, we will do it. I mean, I've never been a pacifist. If I could have ripped Enoch Powell's head off, I'd probably have to join a long queue, but I would have done so, to be honest, because that man, his rhetoric was murderous. Murderous. Every time he came onto the telly, you knew that somewhere someone was being stabbed in the back alley, and that was kind of what London was like in those days. I want to talk about politics a little bit. I mean, I think what you have to realise also was that the revolutionary spirit, if you like, ran through the working class it's kind of opposed really to the whole of society, because society, it was such a bloody dump, it's such a rotten, horrible place, and there were massive struggles against the state. The state that was having a go at the miners or breaking up trade union pickets. Well, the same police who were arresting black kids on sus and beating up in corners and turning a blind eye when an Asian kid got stabbed in an alleyway or whatever it might be. So it was, and politics ran very, very high. I mean, obviously there was a politics, if you like, around Rock Against Racism and the ANL, the SWP and that, which was very, very important in terms of its stance against the Nazis. But also in the black community, there were organisations during this time, like the Black Liberation Front in West London, like the Fasimbas in South East London, the Panthers in Brixton and things like that. And to be honest, all of those groups had some kind of revolutionary politics, and they were the politics of confrontation. And they were inspired by people like Stokely Carmichael coming over here and saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't have to defend myself in terms of me defending myself against the violence of the state or the violence of the clan or wherever it might be. What are you doing? What are you doing?" And this is confrontational politics. And in one sense, I think Lewisham grew out of that, and I'm glad that it did, because it made an incredible difference. I mean, to be honest, when I went to the ANL Carnival in Victoria Park, I came through politics through music. I was a punk, right? Because I belonged there. I could go to punk gigs, and to be honest, no one gave a damn who you were, because we're all freaking weirdos. Yeah? We were all weirdos, dropouts, whether you're white working class or black or whatever it was, yeah? And so I went to those gigs, and I remember going to the Marquee Club up in Soho, and that's the first time I saw Lindsay Kwesi Johnson, about the time he was issuing his first album, Dread Beaten Blood. Darkest Out of Jail, The People's Will Must Prevail, Darkest Out of Jail, all those kind of 5 nights of blood and burning was that was a bubbling revolutionary album of Lindsay Kwesi Johnson, and it was one sense there's a massive crossover between punk and reggae. So, for example, during the punk gigs, what was the sound system? It was always a reggae sound system, to be honest, always, wasn't it?
Always.
I mean, we heard Police and Thieves, 2/7's Clash, all those kind of albums, that music coming across, and we all danced to it. And then I remember going to Vicky Park, and me and my mates, we didn't know where Hackney was either. So we thought the best thing to do was to start Trafalgar Square, because we knew where that was. So we made the march to make sure we actually got to Victoria Park on time. And I do remember polystyrene and all Jimmy Percy and the Clash and whatever. But actually, what I really remember from that day is a huge weight was lifted from me.
Oh, Piers.
Because up to that point in time, I thought no one really cared. Apart from your mates, no one really cared if you got beaten up, packy bashing or skinheads and whatever it might be. No one really cared in society. There's no such thing as a law where you were concerned, because the law didn't protect you. What damn did the law mean to you? It meant nothing, if anything. It meant oppression. So when we got to Victoria Park, and I saw masses of people, and it was black and white. It was mostly white, to be honest. And that wasn't a bad thing. Actually, that was a good thing for me, because I thought, shit, there are white people who give a damn about what happens to me. And actually that lifted that massive burden of oppression that had been weighing down on me for a decade, since the emergence of Powellism and the National Front. The National Front were a real threat, I mean, there were places in London you would not go There's places in London where men with beards today called, you know, and I'm not talking about Muslims, sit and have their cappuccinos. To be honest, I couldn't, you couldn't, we couldn't go there in the 1970s because we'd have a shit beaten out of us, to be honest. That was what was at stake. If you think about it, right, it took blood and guts, literally blood and guts, and all the people here in this room and all the people who fought at Lewisham and all that kind of thing to actually turn the tide. Because actually the tide was going in the other direction. And God knows how that would have ended. And that's a lesson we should learn today. I'll sum up here. But you know, I lived through the 80s, I lived through the 90s, and then the emergence of Islamophobia struck me a bit like power struck me to begin with, to be honest. And what I understood, at least from the days then, was unity was key. You know, people today, poncy academics, talk about politically black. What the hell does that mean? Being politically black wasn't a choice then. Politically black was the fact that you identified with people who would stand alongside and fight alongside with you. And you didn't care. You know, the black organisations had Asian people in their leadership as well, women in their leadership, and so on and so forth. Unity was not a question of a lifestyle choice. Unity was a question of survival. And I think, you know, when we come to questions of Islamophobia today, and I think really unity will be the key there. And I will never forget the Niemoller poem about it came for me first and things like that. And that is ingrained in my memory and always will be. And I hope to hand that on to my kids because it's true. They'll come for you and me first. Well, do you think they'll stop there? I mean, I remember looking in the eyes of the National Front, end on this, in the 1970s, and I knew they hated me. But you know what? I knew they hated the Jews even more. And that was the real thing about the Nazis, really. You know, they rode on the back of Paulism, but they wanted to recreate the Holocaust again. And if you look at America, if you look at the EDL, if you look at all these organisations, this is at the root of what they want to do. This isn't a question of, you know, do I do this, do I do that, I can pick and choose and whatever. This is a question of survival for us. So that fight still goes on. And remember, Muslims were involved in those fights in those days. Sikhs were involved, Hindus were involved, Christians were involved, atheists were involved, revolutionary left were involved, whatever it meant, right? In those days, actually, what was more important was you unified and you fought. And at the end of the day, you had to crush these bastards before they came for you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. We were due to be joined today by Saskilla, who's a grime artist. Unfortunately, he's running a little bit late, but I would say, if you want to hear from Saskilla, he's going to be performing tonight at the gig, so stay along for that, 7 till 10, in the Albany Theatre space. If he does come in, we'll take some questions and contributions, and we'll bring him in later. But I want to make the point on grime music. Certainly with Love Music, Hate Racism, grime, since its inception in 2002, Love Music, Hate Racism, we've tried to give a platform to grime artists, and you can see the similarities with punk. You know, it's a music that the establishment were horrified by. Grime raves were often cancelled or not allowed to go on, but we've seen the music grow and grow and grow. Artists like Stormzy have become so big that they've forced their way in the door, as punk did with bands like The Clash. Saskilla and others have spoken out. It's been involved with Grime for Corbyn, like JME, a number of artists encouraging young people to vote that definitely made a contribution in getting the youth vote up in the last election. He's been outspoken on Grenfell as well. So we're seeing a massive politicisation around grime. So hopefully he will come in and join us and be able to talk to you about some of the things he's been involved in. We'll now take questions, contributions from the floor. If I give you 3 minutes each, and I'll tap on the mic when that 3 minutes is up. Okay, yeah, I've got a roaming mic there. If you're talking to the mic,
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm not from London. My mother is. Lived here for 3 years. A bit embarrassed to tell you where I'm from. I'm from Sevenoaks, in Kent. Okay. Don't judge. And unfortunately, my MP is Michael Fallon.
That's embarrassing.
That is,
yeah. That's the first thing you said that was embarrassing.
Yeah. That's why I was embarrassed. But as I know, Michael Fallon has been known to be racist, homophobic, always on the side of the people that have, not for people with disabilities. Obviously, he voted for the cut to ESA, and you're talking about,
Some of the Labour MPs did.
They abstained, which is not quite the same thing, but yeah.
Sorry, can we let the person speak?
Sorry. And you're talking about how it's a fight for class now, in a way. How can I get people, for example, in areas like Sevenoaks, to listen to the real world, what is going on for the majority and not the few? I hope that's a reasonable question.
I'll take a few, then I'll give you time to sum up on it all. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from around this area.
All right.
So yeah, I'm from around this area, Plumstead, Deptford, and was, one of the organisers, runners of the Old Albany. We was highly politically motivated, or definitely I was, in the 70s. We led out my class and school on strike over Blair Peach. So highly politicised, lots of love, lots of music. But what I want to know now is I can't really see anybody, or like the youth of today, actually giving a fuck about anything. I was like, at all the Civic Cup, all the demonstrations outside Millwall, selling Searchlight and everything. Can't see anybody else doing that now. So yeah, I want to know, or what you guys think, how we can politically motivate people instead of just all being on Facebook or media, which is they don't tap.
Okay, the guy just behind you.
I'm Mike Simmons, so I was involved in the Anti-Nazi League and Rock Against Racism in Camden Town back in the day. Now, 2 points to make. One, to the lady in the front about youth today. They're involved. Kids are involved. The music's there. The Grime for Corbyn stuff was fascinating. Grime for Grenfell stuff, absolutely fascinating. My kids play music, hear music, they go to music, which is every bit as political as the stuff that we did. I'm 62. I just don't hear it, and I don't like some of the stuff that they play for me. That's just life, That's just life. We've got to do what we can do. Keep on doing what we do. Our generation. They're doing their stuff, and yeah, it would be great if it all comes together in a big fight around class, around pay, around cuts, around council housing. That's what we want. But the fight against racism is a constant fight. And I just want to say this thing about punky reggae stuff. Was it all what impact Ra had? Because my memory in Camden Town was Susie and the Banshees fans and Sham 69 fans with swastikas, right, and having to take them on, and trying to take them on before I had temporary boarding, and afterwards, after I'd Rock Against Racism, had the badges and temporary boarding and whatever, and before that, you had to pick a fight, you had to physically pick a fight with them, which wasn't very good because I wasn't that into fight. Afterwards, you had a big cultural thing. I do think Ra was the clincher, because when I was a kid, right, the racists used to go to the Palais. I was a kid in Westlake. They'd go to Hammersmith Palais and they danced to James Brown, and they were horrible racist kids in my school. They could deal with the contradiction, right? What Rock Against Racism did, it forced the leader of the National Front to say, we're going to eliminate jungle rhythms from our popular music, and even those racist kids weren't going to lose their music. So I think it really did make a profound impact. Of course, what really mattered was it was tied into the Anti-Nazi League and to the general fight back. Because you can't win by culture alone, but it's absolutely essential.
Okay, I'll take you at the front, and I'll give the panel a chance to come back on some of that.
Yeah, my name's Mark Thompson. I don't know if you were at the. Anybody who was at the unveiling would have seen me earlier today performing a poem about 77. Both my mum and my stepdad were at the Battle of Lewisham independently. They didn't know each other, but they actually met at a Rock Against Racism meeting about a year later. And as I said then, and I'll say again now, I am the product. At least emotionally, psychologically, I am the product of Rock Against Racism.
It's all your fault, Roger.
Yeah, please. We're talking about Lewisham here. They helped put on, I think it was Misty and Roots and possibly Aswad in 1978 at Goldsmiths. That's what I believe was the first thing that they were involved in. It's you know, these things are incredible. I grew up, I thought everybody's cars were filled with copies of Temporary Hoarding and leaflets saying who killed Blair Peach. I thought that was normal because that was my life, that was the world that I was brought up into. I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of young people and to know that there are, whilst there is a hell of a lot of apathy out there, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. There's a lot of apathy out there. There are also, like the young people sitting in front of me right now, young people that are engaging. There are young people that are getting out there and trying to find out what's going on in the world. And grime seems to have taken the mantle of hip hop. I don't mean gangster rap. I mean hip hop, and taken the place of punk. And taken the place of the conscious reggae movement. Again, I don't mean dancehall, I don't mean bashment, I mean reggae. And they seem to be taking that onto a whole new level. And I think that the spoken word scene, which I'm part of, has also lyrically taken on board. I mean, when I look back, there were the other black kids and mixed race kids didn't know about the Clash. My stepdad was a punk or a skinhead, really. He wasn't actually a punk because yeah. But anyway, you all had very clear delineation. So my mum, who had been involved in it was white, but had been involved in the soul and the reggae scenes, the bluesies from the late 60s and the 70s, when she wasn't old enough to be going to bluesies. But let's not go there. These people. That's died on me, but who cares? These are the people that they did bridge gaps, but there was a reason why these places, people ended up in the same places, and that's that they weren't fucking welcome anywhere else. We had the reggae artists and the punk artists had to go to the same venues because the places that could afford to turn people away would turn them away every time. So and that's what's happening to grime. So it doesn't surprise me that grime ends up angry and it ends up political, because it is the reason that they're being turned away, the reason that they're not welcome in so many places is because they are political, because there are political decisions that are keeping them out. And what we need to see is people making connections with these histories, with what's gone on. You know, I didn't know the au pairs weren't just a bunch of people that came to look after you. They were people floating around the place that I lived. You know, this is you know, when we talk about polystyrene, all of these people were just my childhood, and Rock Against Racism made me. And you people that are here and that are motivated by it, we've got to keep it going. We've got to keep it moving, and it is still here. And unfortunately, our old ears don't necessarily all hear what the young people can hear. And we have to accept that I'm in my mid-40s and I'm already old as far as what musical tastes are. My mum's better than me. My mum still listens to One Extra all day and she will tell you about grime artists. But yeah, some people are able to do that and some of us don't make those movements. I've got to give this mic up because I've been talking for too long.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, we'll let the panel come back on some of that. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, not much. I just want to say a quick couple of words. I think it's true, you can't get depressed about the so-called youth of today. I mean, I don't know, it's bizarre. But Corbyn showed absolutely there's a passive politics there. You go to anything, the young people on the demonstrations over Gaza, the young people on the demonstrations over climate change. What they are apathetic about and against is just the complete and utter fucking boredom of established elite politics, because it's just they see the lies, they see these old, not necessarily old, not even ages. They see these people who talk out. They talk out of mouths, and the words that come out, they've got no relation to their lives. What I do think is that politics is relevant to those, and we've got to find ways of connecting with that. The second thing I want to come back on is about punk could have gone any way. Punk was a reflection of a depressed, racist, fucked up world at the time, and there's absolutely no doubt is that there was pessimism and nihilism inside punk, and there was also fight back and anger. And both those things coexisted side by side. I think Ra did a little bit at bringing out the fighting side of it more than the pessimistic side.
Thanks a lot, Roger.
Oh, another microphone. No, it's important. What do I think? I think, sorry, I should have taken notes. Firstly, yes, I work with, I teach some young people and they're all right, really. They're just not like us. I don't think you have to worry about them. And no, seriously, they're just not like us. You know, they have a different, they have different means of communication. They have different things. If you walk down the street and you hear young people talking behind you, you can't tell whether those kids are black, white, Asian, whatever. They all sound the same. They use the same language. They communicate on the same terms, and I think that in that sense that job is done. You know, because they do speak with one voice, much more than we ever did, and that's okay. So I'm not too worried about them. Some people will always sit back and watch things go on. They'll always be, you know, they'll always be there in the back seat doing nothing.
Always did.
And that's how it is. And there will always only be some people who will be at the forefront of a fight. And I think that's okay too. I think, you know, you just got to let people do what they're going to do. I don't think forcing them will work. I think you have to. Also, we have to let them find their own structures and not try and force our structures on them, because they, as I said, operate in different ways. And I'm not trying to be patronising in that sense, you know, oh, they're different, it's okay, just leave them. I mean, actually, you know, they have different ways of communicating that we don't have quite physically. You know, they communicate through systems that we weren't even invented when I was their age. And I think they'll be okay. I think it'll be fine. I think grime is part of the thing about grime being political is that it's political. It's become political with a capital P recently, but before it was always political with a small p. It was always about the personal, because the personal is political, and it was people talking about their lives. And like, if you're a young person with not a great disposable income and you live on the fringes of society, and you may well have been excluded from school, but not necessarily, you know, like my son used to have to run the gamut. There were two gangs on the way on the way to his school, and there was one that he could walk through, one he couldn't walk through, and like, you know, that's the sort of thing that young people face. They actually face like a life or death situation. They can't necessarily go somewhere and like stand up and say, oh, actually you can't do this, because they can't go there. If they go there, they're likely to get, they're subject to postcode wars, and those things are real. They're very real, you know. And I think you have to accept that. They can't, you know, when I've sat and talked to my son's mates and said, well, why don't you, you know, why aren't you going to museums that are free? Oh, I've got nothing to do. Well, go to museums, they're free. And they were like, what, really? And I said, yeah, you can get on the bus. You just go there, all the way there, and, you know, and so I think schools have let kids down quite a lot. They haven't shown them that there are places they can go to find out stuff, and they kind of allow them to kind of fester in what are essentially postcode ghettos, and that is wrong. And I'm trying to think of all the other things I was going to say, but I can't remember.
There'll be more time.
Is that enough?
Yeah, just very quickly, if I think back to Rock Against Racism, I think what Roger says is right. It was a relationship between Rock Against Racism and the music that young people listen to, because it's what he says is true. I mean, if you think about punk, you know, we think about the Clash and things like that, but obviously there were bands who the National Front tried to put into their orbit. I mean, the most famous is Sham 69, and there are other bands like Cockney Rejects and other bands like that. And if the National Front could have done, they would have colonised punk. But at the end of the day, they weren't allowed to. They weren't allowed to. And actually, you know, when Jimmy Percy came out in 1978 as an anti-racist, as it were.
Wore the badge.
Yeah, wore the badge at the Victoria Carnival. In one sense, I think that in one sense broke the back of the Nazi influence over the punk movement. So clearly there is a relationship between Rock Against Racism and the youth music at the time, and that battle did have to be won. I mean, I do remember, I'm talking about two-tone, I remember Pauline Black and the Selector playing at the Nashville in West London, wasn't it? And the whole room, it was such a weird experience, the whole room was full of British movement skinheads going to listen to the Selector. So Pauline Black came on stage with mixed band, whatever it is, she started singing, and they all started Zeke-heiling. And I was there at the front, I thought, shit. I think I was only a black or mixed race person in the room, and I kind of filtered my way to the back kind of thing, because I thought, well, actually, that's where the exit is. But then the whole gig was ruined, because of these Zeke-heiling Nazis, which of course Pauline Black then had to take on. I remember going to see a Sham 69 gig in Kingston, in West London, which ended in carnage after 2 minutes, because the Nazis basically bust up the whole thing, and then went on a sort of Nazi riot around Kingston, which is quite strange. But so there was a battle for the heart and soul, I think, of popular music. In one sense, today, I don't think we have, like you say, I don't think we have to face that. In one sense, I see actually the fruits of what everyone did in the 1970s being there in terms of multiracial bands and stuff like that. I mean, when you talk about Islam and Muslims, for example, when you look at conscious hip hop, actually there's a lot of young Muslim rappers, on both sides of the Atlantic, who actually, I think, producing the best stuff. I mean, an obvious example over here is Loki, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Who put out that video around song around Grenfell, which, if you like, solidifies it all for me: race, class, religion. It's all in that burning tower block, isn't it? So you know, young people. When you talk about Corbyn, you can talk about momentum as a kind of a political organisation. But if you look at beyond that, and you look to those tens, probably hundreds of thousands of young people actually who support Corbyn, they're anti-racist, they're pro-Palestine, they're anti-Islamophobia, they're anti the rich. You know, they understand about class society. They understand actually that they like us, they have no future unless they're actually going to make it. And actually, to be honest, that is the biggest political movement I think that I've seen in 20, 30 years, to be honest, is that all those young people who are around Corbyn, tens, hundreds of thousands probably, who will probably deliver the next general election for Corbyn, actually, because they'll probably be the ones on the street. So I have no worries about young people at all. They are political like we were, and young people always will be. The question is a political question, isn't it? And that's why we're talking about Rock Against Racism, is because it's the relationship between music and politics which is so key.
Thank you very much. I'm taking one from here, so I'll take you. Sorry.
I think it's great that someone like Rhoda and Roger, alongside Hass and Zak, are on the platform, because like other people, like yourself who spoke, I feel like in a way I'm a child of Rock Against Racism, certainly of the anti-Nazi League. And Mike Simmons is right, and all the other people who spoke, of course, are right, that there was a battle going on. And I used to follow, my mates used to follow, not so much the Clash, though we did follow them back, but more Sham 69. And it's true what people said. And for a bit, my head was thinking, well, you know, some of the people around the Young National Front, one of my best mates joined the bloody National Front, we didn't know a lot. We didn't know a lot. We knew what we were against. We were like, there was class stuff, there was class anger against rich people in Kensington, and so on and so on and so on. But we also, for a bit, picked on the wrong people, and it was raw. It was the contradiction, as people say, going to raw gigs, and later on, when the specials come about and Jerry Dammers and all that stuff, we were sorted by then. But it took a process of not very bright people like myself. Nearly pulled into the Young National Front and British Movement orbit, and then when we realised what filth these people were, it was the RA, it was Anti-Nazi League, we were hard as nails against the British Movement and National Front and all the rest, and would physically battle those people, so that when they turned up later on, some of the same people and some of the different people at specials gigs, not very often I don't think, but certain gigs.
Loads of time.
Yeah, but I mean, well anyway, when they did turn up, we were. I remember Jerry Dammers jumping off at Cambridge, laying into them as well. We were much more sus, and it's a tribute to Ra and the A&L who schooled us really. We didn't get much of an education at school, which is not the teachers' fault because we were horrible people at the time. But we didn't get. It was Ra and A&L who kind of turned us another way, and we could have gone the dark side. There's no two ways about that. The other thing I want to mention quickly was the stuff about tradition, and Lewisham is such a great tradition. There's only fascists around now. I won't say which group it is, but they really can get to me. They take government money and they tell people, they're quite high profile and so on, they tell people if a fascist group comes to town, demonstrate, but either side of the day they're actually in your town. Well, what the bloody hell use is that? Imagine if you'd done that at Lewisham. We all know what would have been different. But these are people high profile. Exactly, yeah, exactly. So the tradition of Lewisham matters. It mattered then. It matters today, and it will matter. The poor sods. Heather Heyer, who was killed by fascists in Trump's America. The people are still getting targeted by fascists in Britain and beyond, in Poland, in Hungary, in Greece, where fascism is quite strong. All that kind of tradition matters. I work for United Against Fascism, and people ask us on and off quite a lot. Wayman and Zak and me and people around at UAF. What do you do in Britain? Not because we're wonderful in Britain, but how do you think we should take these people on? It's incredibly difficult in places like Poland and Greece. Hungary, as people will know, no doubt. Two quick things. The tradition matters. It particularly matters when you read a bloody article in the Observer overnight saying essentially, yeah, Lewisham was great and all the rest of it. They miss out certain key things, like it was Socialist Workers' Party people, LGBT and others who were crucial, critical. That's missed out. It's not an accident. That's deliberate why it's missed out, right? Because there's a militant tradition. They fear the militant tradition that goes into class, Grenfell and all the rest.
Class war. It's not a race war, it's a class war now.
Yeah. So just to say really, it's fantastic these things are still happening. Tomorrow night, if you're free, there's a vigil in solidarity of people at Charlottesville at the US Embassy at 6 o'clock, which UF is called. If anyone could get down there, it will matter, because you know the score in Charlottesville, and I think tradition's hugely important. That's why the book and all the rest of it matters. And I second what people have said, that people of a much younger generation the kids will be all right, I think.
Yeah, I'll take you. If we try and keep contributions of 3 minutes, we can get as many in as possible.
Yeah, thank you. So say three things, we got confused now. One was, there are young people that all parties have given up on. And we had a group called Rise Up that did a lot of work with them. These are people who've been alcoholics, living rough, on the margins. And they didn't go there with like middle class people and saying you've got to register to vote because of this policy. They went and told them they don't want you to vote. They don't want you to have a voice. And they organised themselves, and we got 100,000 of those people registered. And they're setting up their own videos, very different from the videos that even Momentum does for under 20-year-olds. And they're really reaching and talking about their own stories, which is really important. Grime has been attacked unbelievably since the 90s in terms of stopping all their concerts, Cameron coming on TV and Newsnight condemning some of the songs for being, all the rest of it. And it's great that it's become a political force around Corbyn. It's become a movement, and it's growing as a movement, to hear the voices of ordinary. They're not interested in Brexit. They're talking about the hoods. They're talking about the real experiences they're experiencing in their areas, and that's great to have that voice. On the other side of it is that we've got far right. They've also got their own music, and they're using it across Europe and in America, and we need to be aware of that, and they're getting a lot of people through that. They set up new forms of organisation around football where you're not allowed to wear your colours. So you're united as a movement, and they're growing, the football lads. So the fight's there, the far right are here, and the fights have changed. Music has changed as well, and we have huge different genres. And I remember one Love Music, Hate Racism gig, and the fabric. One floor was indie, one was dubstep, one white and black were mixing. It's not happening. And I think things have changed, and I think that hasn't changed. We need to think about, and I think grime is leading the way now, but I think that has also, there's times to change about how we move and do things. So I was going to say one other thing, but that's my contribution.
Thanks a lot. I'll take, yeah.
Okay, right. I was a punk in 1976. I was fed up, I was peed off. No, I wasn't working class, I came from a nice middle class family. With certain exceptions. My great uncle had fought in the International Brigade and was on the list of the people the Nazis wanted to shoot. So that's kind of where I came from. I saw the Sex Pistols at the Nashville. I thought, yeah, I like this. I was angry, I was fed up, I wanted something that was a change from the pretentiousness and the posing of all of the prog rock bands and the people like our dear friend Eric Clapton and his racism. Well, a man who spent his whole career plundering black music, to say that, well, so did all really. Good job I didn't have any Cream albums. But there are other things involved. I had no time for the swastika wearers, understandably. We used to have arguments about that, as other people have said. And I remember going to the Roxy. Band I was involved with were playing there. We were opening up. The only ones were headlining. Don Letts was on the desk. And there was nothing to play. What do you play after you played the Ramones album 4 times and the 6 singles that are out there? He did. I spoke to him about it years later, and I said, "Well, why do you do it? You know, what convinced you? Because it's the right thing to do." He said there was nothing else to play, so I played heavy dub, and people danced. And you can spot former punks of a certain age. You put Bob Marley on. You put any heavy dub on, they're dancing. There's Deptford Dub Club down the road about second, third Thursday of every month, and it's full of people of my age. But there were more to it. Rock Against Racism ended up being a kind of umbrella for a lot of other things that were going on. The music press, particularly initially Sounds and Enemy, embraced punk. Bands like the Cortinas were considered to have a whiff of fascism. They were slagged off. It was a while for the Enemy to wake up. They're about a year late, as usual. And there was a hatred of this growing mood of fascism amongst a lot of young people. People who didn't feel threatened because somebody had a different skin colour or came from a different background. Particularly in the part of North London I was from, there were a lot of Jewish people around. It's called the Bagel Belt, by the way, around that area for obvious reasons. It runs from Cable Street round to Golders Green. And the number of guys I was involved with bands in who came from a Jewish background, people whose parents and grandparents were Holocaust survivors, it concentrates the mind. Rock Against Racism provided something that people could say I'm part of, rather than it being lots of disparate little groups. It made a huge difference. There's a colleague of mine at work, he's my age. He's from an Asian background, his family came here from Kenya. When he was 11, 12, 13, he used to have to run home from school to get away from the racists. Now things have changed. His wife's white, he works in a multicultural environment, and things like Rock Against Racism made part of that change possible. Doesn't mean the fight's over, we've got to keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the questions and debates that we've had this afternoon, one of which is the one about race and class, because I think we have to be a little bit careful here, because whilst obviously I agree that the biggest divide in society is between classes and, you know, the 1% and the 99% and so on, but I think we have to be careful not to underestimate the specific impact that racism has. You know, it precisely is the case, as Hassan and others have indicated, that Islamophobia, you know, the specific demonisation of Muslims in our community is absolutely rampant and has been ramped up over the last 15, 20 years. On the wider questions of institutional racism, it absolutely is the case that if you are from a black and minority ethnic community, you're much more likely to be excluded in school, much more likely to have an educational experience that means you're less likely to achieve exam success, less likely to go to the most prestigious universities, less likely to live in the most prosperous areas, get a decent job. I know it as a lawyer, much more likely to be criminalised, dragged through the criminal justice system, prosecuted, incarcerated for longer. Those things are real, and the way in which racism is used to divide working class people, black from white, is real. That is precisely why they do it, and therefore we do have to have a specific focus on challenging and tackling racism, which is what we try to do through Stand Up to Racism, Love Music, Hate Racism. And I think, you see, one of the reasons why initiatives around music are so important is precisely because, as people have said so eloquently, music is probably the most common arena in which young people come together and celebrate the things that they have in common, rather than discussing and rowing about the things that separate and divide them. And I think on the question of young people, we shouldn't get ourselves too hung up on the question of apathy and so on. I mean, to some extent we can be a bit rose-tinted about these things. I mean, I read I hope that this isn't true, by the way, but I read somewhere that in the 1980s, you talk about a lot of the the great political music that came out of the 1980s. Apparently, as I say, I hope this is wrong, the biggest selling male solo UK artist in that decade was Shakin' Stephen. People talk about, in Zimbabwe, the great independence concert that Bob Marley and the Wailers spoke at. Absolutely brilliant. Well, apparently Robert Mugabe wanted Cliff Richard. Despite that, young people find their way, find different forms of music, the fusion of punk and reggae and so on. Grime, actually, a lot of grime, frankly, is just insular, macho bullshit. It is, people just, slagging off each other's crew, lunging at the camera and so on. However, within that, and I think precisely because its origins are in those isolated working class estates in Bow, inevitably the reality of life for young people comes out of it. Dizzy Rascal, the first grime winner of the Mercury Music Prize, his album was called Boy in the Corner. It reflected his life as someone who, was from an excluded community, and gradually grime has found its way, so that the albums that people like Stormzy, people like Kano, people like Skepta, who won the Mercury Prize last year, they reflect the political atmosphere that young people are living through. I'll just end on this. I feel as if, right at the moment, there is a slight whiff amongst young people of the atmosphere that there was when Mark Duggan was killed in 2011. Why? Because that experience of exclusion, that experience of police brutality, that experience of frustration is absolutely there, and I think we have to find a way of giving people a home where they can reflect, they can organise those things. Love Music, Hate Racism won't necessarily be the only thing, but it certainly can provide a soundtrack to those struggles to come.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm Kareem, Limpton Grounds in Lewisham. I did have two questions. Going back to the lady at the front's earlier point that no one's really picked up on is how do we engage with communities like in Sevenoaks or like Bromley or even going out to Dover, where potentially if the border gets moved from Calais to there, potential places where people don't think like we do in this room, and how do you engage with those communities in a way to kind of change the situation in terms of where they're coming from, places which are more likely to have a Tory MP and not vote for Corbyn. So, which kind of links to my next question, is that with the Corbyn and Momentum thing, which I agree is fantastic and it's made me join the Labour Party and I'm all for it, but my worry is that it's a little bit over-reliant on a figurehead, and it's this kind of hero worship, and how sustainable is that for a genuine movement, and aren't we in danger of making it about one person when really the issue is so big? I mean, I know the motto is, for the many, for the few, and he's very good. Actually, I really like the way he kind of he's kind of been like a reluctant hero. You kind of see the progression he's gone through from not really wanting the limelight to now really using it. And it's been great to watch that. But my concern is that the politicization is not deep enough. It's kind of like a surface debate, like, and really getting deeper into it. So those were my two questions for the panel.
If anyone's got more questions and contributions.
I wanted to respond to the lady at the front about youth engagement in politics. And social media for me and a lot of people my age is actually one of the ways that we engage with politics and how we get information about politics. And I think we had the biggest youth turnout in 25 years in the 2017 election. And I think that social media played a really big part in that. In terms of Corbyn's campaign, you could tell that he put a real effort in social media, and I saw friends of mine who weren't interested in politics get behind Corbyn and vote, and I think that's really amazing. And then in terms of politics and music, I just wanted to kind of talk about what's current right now, and if we don't feel like there's politics in music, where I've really felt accepted and where I've kind of felt the most kind of acceptance amongst peers is being in house music and in clubs, where I'm surrounded by people of all races, classes and ages, all dancing together to different types of music, records from Africa, records from the US, music that's born out of black and queer culture. And I think that's really beautiful, and I don't know if it's celebrated as much as possible. Promoters who don't represent in their lineups black people or female DJs or people who are underrepresented, they are called out and they are shamed as well. So I think this is a kind of almost like a model that should be taken up by popular music and should be spoken about more.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hesitate about saying anything today because I'm well out of the beyond the generations where I'm going to live music gigs, and I suppose the closest I'd get is browsing on Spotify. But it was just really in response. I had to get up and speak because two people have mentioned Bromley and Sevenoaks. Now, you might have heard me earlier when I was talking about my role, my activity during Lewisham 77 and being politically active around Lewisham at that time. I actually lived in Bromley at that time. And when the ANL and RA kicked off, we started organising RA gigs in Bromley and Orpington, and it was a Tory area, particularly still is a Tory area, fairly white area. But believe me, if you get involved in an active movement, if you get engaged, you will find people out there. Because we had organising meetings of the Anti-Nazi League where we had a public meeting where 300 people turned up, but we had organising meetings, not a public speaker, organising meetings of 30, 40, 50 people would come. We had our own Rock Against Racism gigs down there. We then spread from Rock Against Racism into Rock Against Sexism. And we had loads of people actually who went on to become politically active themselves, and usually their solution to living in Tory Sevenoaks or Bromley or Sidcup, God forgive, was actually they tended to move out, and it was very bad for someone like me who was actually had their own place to live in Bromley, because all the young people would go to college or move elsewhere to where things were more exciting. But believe me, there are these people everywhere, and the more you get involved in an active organisation, the better that will be. I mean, obviously, they used to laugh at me when I first started going to the meetings, because I was actually 27, 28, and they turned to me and said, "Well, what do you listen to? Frank Sinatra?" There was and that was when I was in my late 20s, so I wouldn't deem to get involved now. But as I say, get involved in active movements. You will find people who are angry, so you will find people who want to get involved. And I agree with the speaker who said that energy and that commitment is out there if you look for it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring the speakers back now to give them plenty of time to sum up. Just before I do, if you want to hear more about the politics of Rock Against Racism and other movements that have used music to combat racism and other political struggles. I mentioned earlier, Roger's got a fantastic book with Red Saunders that he edits. It's available at bookshops out there. There's also Daniel Rachel's The Walls Come Tumbling Down, and Dave Randall, a local South London resident from formerly of Faithless, has wrote a book, Sound Systems and the Political Power of Music. They're all brilliant books to check out from the bookshops. Just two quick things. I want to make some plugs. So there's the gig tonight, which will be starting at 7. Come and support. We're absolutely keen with Love Music Hate Racism to follow the RAR model and start to get as many gigs around the country as we can. There's another event happened just yesterday in Manchester. There's been gigs in Oxford again. So we want to start the movement again that works with young people to put these gigs up and down the country. And a plug really is the Notting Hill Carnival. We're very, very delighted this year to have a Love Music Hate Racism float in a Notting Hill Carnival. Go and talk to Smokey Joe Roadshow, who we're partnering on that float, but you can all welcome to join us as being a part of that float. You know, we know the tradition of Notting Hill Carnival is one of anti-racism. It's about uniting people, and we're keen in this year after Grenfell to have that politics very much front and centre at Carnival. So there's registration forms at the Love Music Hate Racism stall out there. Okay, so I'll take the speakers back now. I'll start with Roger.
Okay, a really good discussion, I thought. I think probably the most political, angry, furious, beautiful piece of music that I know is John Coltrane's Alabama, that was written after the bombing of a church, and there's no vocal in it. But you can hear the fury and the anger coming through, and the beauty is in the music, the way that it's structured and everything. So I think that political music is not reliant on what takes place during that late 1970s period. The same with, say, Charlie Bird Parker's Now's the Time, which he wrote now's the time, meaning seriously, because once again he'd been refused entry to a hotel in the south and had to go and stay with some people he knew. So he thought now's the time for change. So the music shifts and moves and changes all the time, and I think that it's important that it's not the music necessarily, but it's certainly the people who are listening to it and why they're listening to it and what's happening to them in the world around them, which I think is always positive. I think the other thing is, yes, class is at the centre of the problems that the world faces. The ruling class still own all the wealth, and we still make it all. And this time that was changed. You're going to see from Grenfell Tower, who cared about the people there, the working people, the people who gave, etc., etc. Fantastic example of what really humanity is all about, and it's also a complete sign of what the haves is all about. And so I think that that's central to the world we live in. But the poison of racism blocks us from fighting that, and that is why it is important that we fight against racism. Racism is the poison that stops you fighting the boss because you won't unite with your fellow worker. Racism is the thing that won't let you stand up against the local council because your neighbour's from another ethnic minority or whatever. Racism is the thing that stops you standing up and saying I'm for humanity and not for humanity. The poison of racism is so deep and it's so institutionalised that it has to be fought, and it is still the priority fight. Now, also saying that, the other thing that gets rid of racism is when people are fighting back. So again, poison of racism feeds on people's apathy and people's inability to fight, on their powerlessness. And I think that's why it's all joined in, and it comes back to why I think RAR and the Anti-Nazi League was important, is because it was about organisation. In the end, you have to have organisation. Anybody can have their own thought and their own beliefs, and they can do it, and that's no problem whatsoever. But it doesn't mobilise anything. Organisation means that a certain set of ideas can be mobilised upon. People in Rock Against Racism who actually an old guy that was really close to me said, if I'd organised the carnival, I would have got Beethoven playing the ninth string quartet, you know, the grand one, because that's Beethoven's great political statement, if you like. And 3 Men and a Dog would come along. So the idea is that it's organisation. Who booked the coaches in Leeds, Manchester, Oldham, Glasgow, Bristol, Bath, Southampton? Who brought all those coaches there? I was talking to the guy who's organised the Leeds VAR the other day. They booked 33 coaches to the carnival from Leeds. Now that is organisation. That means that you have to have organisation to fight with a certain, with a knowledge that whatever you're fighting is there and you have to fight it. I think it's that's the most important thing out of this. And I think at the moment, it's not necessarily the music. See, the thing was with VAR in the late 1970s, the youth, both black and white and Asian youth, the horizon was really short. Unemployment was on the rise, racism was on the streets. There was no future, no fun, if you like, in terms of being a young that. And that situation expressed itself through young black music and young white music. It's through reggae and Steel Pulse, Aswad, Black Slate, all the bands that were talking about Handsworth, talking about Liverpool, talking about Brixton in their music. Not like Marley singing about Jamaica, but singing about living as a young black working class male here. There was a VAR band called the Alien. I can't remember their second name. Alien Culture. And the bass player was an Asian guy, and he said the very, very first time he ever played the bass, well, he said his very first gig. So that was the kind of that was the important mood of that of do it yourself. But the organisation is crucial. The poison of racism has to be fought with organisation, if you like. And I think the other thing is that the music they are still listening to it. I'm a bit like his mum. So the music I find is great. But the coming from the Corby, I've got to sum up now, unfortunately. But I think the final thing I want to say is that the youth that expressed itself passively through Corbyn has got to be turned into an action. That is a problem, into activity. The passivity is one thing, and it is a wonderful indicator of the mood and of how people feel. But we need action if we're going to take the fight against this stinking rotten racism system forward.
Thank you very much, Robbie. Thank you very much.
I've got to look at my notes now. Hang on, I've got to do it like this. So to follow on from what I just said, so the slogan is obviously agitate, educate, organise, and organise is key. You're absolutely right. What we had back then, which we don't have now, was the kind of was a system of unionisation, and that has been absolutely undermined by successive Tory governments. And successive Tory. Well, it started off with the Tory governments, and
we had a lot more of them.
Yeah. Well, essentially, unionism was a way for young people to actually access political structure, and it was a very easy way of doing it. We had, the NUS now they're even being disemboweled, haven't they? So essentially, it's harder to find a structure that works. You have to really look for it. It doesn't come and find you in the way it always did before. And essentially, working class people found through unionism that's the way they gained their rights within the society. So unions are really important, and if necessary, grab them back from, as we used to call, when I was part of Red Wedge, we used to call there was this whole raft of people we used to call the fat men in red ties, which were essentially, they were kind of the old school kind of labour Labour voting union people who didn't care about black people, they didn't care about women.
Very
really
racist people in those red
They
ties
really,
as well.
no, they were really only after furthering their own agenda. They didn't care about the likes of me and the likes of most of the people, you know, who wanted to disagree with them. But essentially, however, having said that, they were still the guardians of they were the guardians, and they protected the rights of a lot of people, and those rights have been terribly undermined since unions have lost a lot of their power. So if you have the opportunity to join a union within your work, do so. You know what I mean? It's a way of like people organising outside the system. It's really important. I've rejoined the MU after years of not bothering, just because I just thought, hang on a minute, you know, there is a chance. And the MU are working. They have finally sort of woken up to the fact that they do have to make an effort to be inclusive. If you're a DJ, you can join the MU now. You don't have to be a traditional musician. They are also working very hard on this thing, the Form 696, which is about urban music, where the Met Police require, if you're putting on an urban music event, they will require the names and addresses of all the DJs and performers. And to their credit, the MU, I actually saw, I was in Parliament just before Christmas and actually saw the MU, a guy from the MU, and the Minister for Culture. No, not Culture, it's called something else.
Intimacy.
Yeah, it does, yeah. But anyway, they had meetings about Form 696, and I think that's actually going to finally be dropped. And we need to get Sadiq Khan on side as well. But yeah, I mean, that's really important. Other thing, what did I want to say? Demise of unions. Oh, Bromley. Yeah, Bromley keeps coming up. I had a lot of mates. I had a lot of mates from Bromley back in the day. They were all right, really. A lot of them went on to form really brilliant bands, you know. And to be fair, but they were all from Bromley, but I met them in the West End because they couldn't hang out in Bromley. But equally, you know, I wasn't welcome in Brixton. I've kind of lived most of my life in Brixton. I was kind of like, oh, there's that girl again. It's what people would say as I walked past in Brixton on my way to Soho to meet up with my mates from Bromley, who also weren't welcome in Bromley. So, you know, to be fair, it was like we were outsiders. We were all outsiders. What did I want to say? Form 696, racial profiling, roll deep at Trafalgar Square. Love music, hate racism. That was really good. I took my kids to that one. Yeah, racial profiling still exists within the police force, within, you know, like I live right near a police station, and I have at night heard my son shouting my name, and I've had to run downstairs and extract him from whatever copper has got hold of him at that particular time, you know, because he was kicking rubbish into the streets, because he was cycling on the pavement. I mean, you know, it's like, take your pick. He's been handcuffed for cycling on the pavement, you know what I mean? That's bearing in mind he had his full, he used to do like biking, and it had full kit on and everything. It was, you know, it's fairly obvious that he wasn't generally cycling on the pavement, but anyway. So, but the thing is, what you have to do is you have to write letters. I mean, I spend half my time writing letters of complaint. And the thing, what the cool thing is about getting older is you gain a bit of gravitas. And so, no, it's serious. It's
Still
serious.
waiting for that.
Right, okay, I've got to sum up. No, you gain a bit of gravitas. So don't worry about getting older. I'm not really one for like demos anymore. I've done my demos. I mean, I'll still agitate, I'll still organise, but the important thing is that now I have the gravitas to write letters. And I complain all the fucking time, and that's what I do. You know what I mean? I write letters. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And when faced with an angry woman who can express herself, a lot of this does actually, people do back down. Believe me, I have shouted people down, and I don't just mean back in the day when sea-kiling crowds, when faced with sea-kiling crowds. I back down. People back down now. I shouted at them. They backed down, and I continue shouting. I am continually angry. What did I want to say? Yeah, we have really gone off on grime, haven't we? And it is a sausage fest, and you know, like House is much more inclusive, and that's absolutely true. And I did forget to mention that. But yeah, because there was grime for Corbyn, there wasn't House for Corbyn, so we haven't talked about that. But yeah, young people have their own music, and it is multicultural, and it is multiracial, and it is inclusive, and yeah, you know, let's not forget that House started in the sort of gay black ghettos in Chicago. Yeah, Chicago. Yeah. So you know, but yeah, to sum up, the fight is still going on. We all fight in our different ways. Please don't stop fighting. Don't worry that you're too old to do it anymore. I mean, I'm not sitting down outside at Downing Street anymore, quite frankly. You know, I'm not doing that anymore. I do what I do. There's plenty of young people who are happy to do that, and there's plenty of other people who are happy to do that. But don't think I'm not fighting. I'm fighting every day, but I do it on my terms. And I am now a strong, angry, well, furious most of the time, and I argue with anybody over anything that's wrong, and I will pick you up on it if I think it's wrong. So don't stop, keep at it, and you know, keep at it.
On. Thank you very much, Robin.
As director of the Muslim Institute, I want to make a public statement. This man radicalised me. It was conveyor belts from Rock Against Racism to the Anti-Nazi League to revolutionary politics, and actually that's what a lot of my generation, we were radicalised in that way, through the music which we loved anyway, towards an organisation like the Anti-Nazi League that had a sole aim, which was to take out, if you like, the thing that dominated and oppressed us, and then into a much wider political, revolutionary political milieu. So he's the man that radicalised me, if anyone wants to quote me on that. So I expect a knock on the door, Roger. But seriously, I want to talk about a few historical parallels, really. It's very interesting, when you look at racism, the nature of racism today, is it constantly mutates, which tells you that actually it is intrinsic to the system, in one sense. It's part of the DNA of the structure of the world in which we live, but it continually mutates according to the needs of those who wish to divide us. So for example, at the moment, of course, Islamophobia is the way in which, if you like, our common rulers, try to divide us one from another. And let's not forget, when you talk about race and class,